Today on Mindful Momentum, we explore a question every organization and community should be wrestling with. Who will lead us next, and how do we prepare them well? My guest today is someone I deeply admire, a fellow NSA member, my dear friend, and truly one of the kindest and quietly disciplined humans I know. Every morning, come sunshine or sorrow, he writes 140 words at a time. And those words have grown into 28 acclaimed books on leadership. Ron Rael is known as leadership trailblazer, a catalyst, a teacher who sparks insights, challenges assumptions, and awakens leaders to their fullest capacity. Over 4 decades, he has coached more than 14,000 leaders across United States and Canada, guiding them to become capable, competent, and confident. Ron is also a creator of Future Leader System, a four-part methodology that helps organizations intentionally nurture their next generation of leaders. What I love about Ron is he never teaches leadership as a title. It's always an art, a craft, and a practice. And he brings humor, honesty, and deep care to every conversation. I had a chance to see that when he performed live at our local NSA chapter's recent conference. I was completely mesmerized as he brought a manager and an employee to life, switching between the two roles so seamlessly that the entire room was spellbound. Ron, welcome. It's such a joy to have you here.
I return it. It's a joy to be with you, Anu. I appreciate that. It's always great talking with another leader expert, someone who is really on the cutting edge of leadership and looking at it in a different way that most leader experts do.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. And you describe yourself as an accidental leader. When we were there in this confab for NSA, that's what you began with. And it kind of stayed with me. Why do you call yourself that? And how did leadership enter your life and shaped your desire to lead?
It may sound surprising, but I sort of felt the need to understand leadership from the age of 11. I was living in a small town, and some very well-known people who ran a bank in the community and who everybody trusted decided for some reason to embezzle money. And it hurt a lot of people in the town. And I didn't know a lot, but it just seemed so strange because I knew who they were. And why would somebody who was in a position of power and authority decide to do that? And so I began to wonder about just that. And I didn't know what leadership was. I just knew that there were people that ran organizations. And so over the years, as I went through my teen years and young adult years, when somebody would say, we need a volunteer to do this, and I raised my hand, do we need a volunteer to do that? Raise your hand. And that was in school, that was in Boy Scouts, that was in my church, in organizations. And I didn't know what it was. I just had this desire to be the one say, do that. And let me tell you, Anu, I crashed and burned a lot. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I just screwed up. But for some reason, that didn't stop me from doing it. And so then, fast forward through my career, I decided that I kind of had the term leadership in mind, though I called it manager, supervisor. Those are the two terms. And so, in my first job, that what I had a full-time job, salaried, all the things that I had been hoping to have and wanting to have, I finally landed that job. And at my first performance review at 6 months, I had a supervisor, a boss, a retired military colonel, Marine colonel, who when he asked me during the performance review what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, especially in the future. I told him, well, sir, hope to be a manager of this fine company someday. I want to be a leader. And he laughed in my face. He just laughed. And he thought that was the funniest thing he had ever heard. And I'm devastated. I was being honest with him. I was explaining what my desire was. Again, I couldn't exactly explain it, but that's the words came out. And he just basically said, Ron, you are too nice. You'll never be a good leader because you need to be tough. You need to be mean. And I was like, what? I, I need to be mean? Again, it didn't make any sense. Um, and so I think that was a catalyst for me to try to understand what leadership was. And so I did as much research as I could. And that time, it's not like today where we have access to internet and AI, a lot of information. I just basically read biographies of people who were great leaders that I admired. And it wasn't just business. It was in baseball, other sports, people that we know today, or maybe we didn't know. I began to understand a little bit about leadership, and I was curious, what makes this person a great leader? Because I wanted to feel like that. I wanted to be like that. And so I studied and I observed. I spend a lot of time observing people in the job, outside the job, seeing what they're doing, where people want to follow them or people don't want to follow them. And I was always confused as to why certain people in a leadership position actually did like my boss did, is demean employees, be mean to them, just use them. And I found that there are quite a few leaders in organizations that are narcissists that just use people. And again, I didn't understand that. So then when I finally had the opportunity to have my very first employee, and I was in finally a leadership position, a senior management position with a fast growing company, I thought, okay, now I know how to lead. And my employee was Rita. She was excellent. She did some fantastic work. We worked together really well until about the 2 year point. Something was going wrong and we didn't get along anymore. And I did the same thing to her that I had done to me many times in my various jobs. I said, Rita, if you don't shape up, I'm going to fire you. And at that moment, I realized I was channeling every single boss that I'd had since the age of 11, who just used force and coercion and guilt and all those negative things, using fear basically to get me to do what I wanted to do. So at that time, I said, I really need to double down. And so I really started doing more research and understanding, observing leaders. And about that time, then I got the opportunity to become a professional speaker. I joined NSA, and of course, so many people in NSA, National Speakers Association, call themselves leader experts. So I talked to them and I see what they did. And then finally, a great job opportunity came up where this organization, who was nationally, needed a trainer to talk about leadership, aspects of leadership to CPAs, controllers, CFOs, accounting managers, whatever job in accounting, they would show up for continuing education on leadership. And I started to notice a trend, and this was about the late 80s, early 90s. Most of the people, though they had a leadership title, when I would say to them, so you're a leader, and they would say, no, I'm an accountant. I'm a banker. I work in engineering. I'm in the medical field. And I couldn't understand, why don't you recognize that you are a leader? You have a leader title. You have people that you're responsible for. You're running programs and projects and companies and things like that. And yet, consistently, I'm not a leader. Some people even got upset and said, don't call me leader. Do not call me a leader. And again, it just confused me because I thought that was a privilege and an opportunity to do something to have impact. Now, they did have impact, but they only saw themselves as just whatever their profession was or whatever industry they were. And so that led me to discover what I call the reluctant leader syndrome. And so over the years of those 14,000 plus people that I had the opportunity to coach, I discovered that more than 70% of them do not own the title of leader, though it could be vice president, could be CEO, could be director. They are. And so that again got me going and real understanding. And a lot of then what I've written and spoke about since that time, and that actually that was my first leadership book called The Reluctant Leader, to go into that phenomenon. And I continue to do that. And so I'll talk a little bit later about my other book, but it does refer to a reluctant leader, but particularly a younger leader. So hopefully that was the answer you're looking for, Anu.
Yes, and what an amazing story you walked us through, and how these pivotal moments in your life, starting from the age 11, why would anybody who is in a position of power and authority do something like that? Steal money. The second one being that, having a bad boss. And it's quite a coincidence when you were talking about that incident. It reminded me of one of my first reviews in a corporate job, where I said, I want to be a VP in 5 years. And my manager laughed as well.
Oh no, no wonder my story resonated with you.
And he said, "Isn't that over ambitious, Anu?" And I looked at him and I'm like, "Really? I thought I could be a VP here." And for you, it gave you purpose. It became your catalyst. For me, it kind of shrunk me. It took me a while
Hmm.
to get back that confidence. It took away the self-esteem. But I'm glad it gave you the momentum to figure out, okay, what does a true leader look like? And then another growth moment came for you when you were a leader yourself, and how you had become them.
Oh, that was just a terrible feeling to trash another human being who really had talent and desire. And she actually became a leader after I left that company. So I guess I did something right, but to get to that point, and that's why I say that leadership is an art because you can't learn things like that, how to deal with a difficult employee or a situation that you find yourself in from a book. You can't get it from a book. You can't get it from a class. You have to live it. And the only way we learn how to be leaders is to be leaders. I'm sure you found that out in your career.
Yes, I did. So why are so many leaders then reluctant leaders? What's what's going on?
Well, if we go back to my story, if they were chastised, they were ridiculed, they were um, told, no, you'll never be a leader, you can imagine the attitude, how they would feel. I use an analogy is there's many people across the United States that suffer from what's called numbers flu, as they say that they're bad at math. And you put a sheet of numbers in front of them or ask them to do a spreadsheet or look at a report and they go, they panic. Well, they suffer from numbers flu because at some time, usually cases, they were in early grade, they were doing math, they couldn't solve the problem, they felt embarrassed, and the teacher or the classmates or both ridiculed them. And so in their mind, that said, I'm not good at math. And so they continue to hold that today, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Same thing with leadership. If a person was promoted to a leadership role without the training, which happens so way too often, and then they fail because they will, because once you get into a leadership role, you will fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. And so they feel, okay, I'm not a leader. I'm not leadership material. Or they've worked for a bad boss and they see, okay, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like the colonel or some of the other bosses that I had. And so you can see they get to do that. But the biggest thing is that when you're in a leadership role, you are highly visible and everything you do is under a microscope. And some people don't like that. It's uncomfortable, which means that this is just an example. I went from a very organized organization to a startup that didn't have a whole lot of structure. The organization I was before did have structure. And so they kept asking me, what did you do at that company? What did you do at that company? Because they wanted to start setting up systems and processes. And all I would have to say is, well, at this company, we did this. The next day around the office, oh, this is the new policy. This is what we're going to do because this is what Ron said we were going to do. It's like, what? I shared my opinion. I didn't say we should do it, but that happened over and over again. And I realized the power, the influence we have. And it's scary, especially the fact that you have to be the one who's accountable. You're the one where the buck stops. And if your team fails, you can't be pointing fingers or looking at somebody else. You have to be that one that stands up and said, I messed up, I'll fix it. Um, and so that became another one of my topics that I really delved into is the topic of accountability. And so every kind of skill and attitude and characteristic of a leader, I've done research on it and spoken about it because it's such a broad thing. You know, some people think leadership is this. No, it's, I put my hands all across the room and yet can't quite do it. And that's part of the art.
And that's why your answer was also like a part of the art, because I heard many things in it. I heard that there is this, it could be that they had experience growing up where they heard something negative and, this is not what I want to do or I'm not good at, and that became a kind of a mindset. The other thing is that it is learnable. It is there are so many skills within leadership where you need training, and we go in and we just go sometimes blindly pushed. Or in my world, I was in the tech world before I became a coach. People were being promoted because they were good individual contributors. That was
Mhm.
organization's way of rewarding them. So they'd get this promotion, and now they have the reward was they'll have five people underneath them.
And
That
there's a
was
lot
their
more
reward.
work. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot
and
more
lot
work
more
in being a
work, and
leader.
that was their reward. And they failed miserably. And one way they were two ways I would see. One would be they'll keep doing their IC work, and now from those five people they started taking their IC work also. You forget it, I'll do this, because now they thought, okay, I've got a promotion, I have bigger responsibility, so I should do more work. Right? So that was
Oh,
one modus operandi. The other
so
one
true.
was, and another one was, okay, I have these five people, I'm just going to let them do the stuff, and I can go and work on my dream project. So those were the two opposite ends of the methodology I would see them adopt when they were purely promoted on their IC skills and not prepared for leadership.
Yes,
Some of
that's
them, when
probably one of the biggest contributors to the reluctant leaders because I worked with CPAs and accountants and bankers and engineers, and they were the best at their job, and yet suddenly they're in a leadership role without any preparation or training. And guess what? You're responsible for 5 people or 20 people or 50 people, and you have to figure it out on your own, which is really unfair.
and then they'll go back and say, I'm never going to be a leader again.
Yeah,
So
don't promote me. Don't promote me. I don't care about
not
the
for
more
me.
more paycheck or the parking slot. No, no, I don't want to lead. So yeah, that's the reluctant leader syndrome.
Yeah. You have coached so many leaders. What are some of the challenges you see, and why is there struggle for us to find good leaders? So, two-part question.
Well, most professionals, like the ones that you worked with, have a huge amount of self-esteem in their job and their profession. And they like, let's say, they do development work or they like engineering. And so their ego, which is normal, invested in that. And suddenly they're thrown in a situation, especially dealing with people, the human factor, that they feel totally uncomfortable and they just don't feel capable at all. And so you can see we're motivated by either moving towards something or away from something. So they're promoted thinking that they'll move towards this leadership role, but in effect they're running away from these uncomfortable feelings of feeling incompetent, feeling unable to do it, and more importantly, failing over and over and over again, crash and burn all the time. And so you can see where it's like, okay. I'll go in the corner and work on my pet project, even though I've got these 5 people working for me. But they'll do the work and they'll figure out what to do because they're experts in their field. And I'll just, sort of keep an eye on them.
Yeah, yeah. And you highlighted, I think we both have seen those problems and you highlighted them well. So, this is a right segue into the powerful future leader system that you provide and bring it into your books. So, can you shed some light on that? What are the four strategies? Why do they work? How do we become a better leader?
To become a leader, a person needs a formal process with dedicated resources and, more importantly, dedicated people to help them to do that. Otherwise, I use an analogy in the book, the Empathy Factor. It's of a person I call Kermit, who's a teenager in your family, and they want to drive. And so I ask this question to the audience. And so you want Kermit to drive? Maybe they need to take you to the doctors, or maybe whatever reason. Do you just give Kermit the keys and say, go drive? You wouldn't. You would spend a whole lot of time with Kermit. You'd make sure they had the classes, make sure they knew how to drive, they could pass the test, things like that. And you would then make sure that even after they got their license, that they knew the rules of the road, observe them, be with them, make suggestions, sometimes maybe tell them stop doing that. But that's what we do with leaders is we give them the keys to not an expensive car, but the keys to a team, keys to a project, sometimes keys to a company, and say, all right, go do it without any training. A new leader needs guardrails, needs the guidance. And so the future leader system is built around the concept that as soon as someone is in a leadership role, the process kicks in. And because it takes 5 or more years to take somebody who knows very little about leadership to where they're just starting feeling comfortable, can be as much as 5 or 6 years. And so it's the nurturing that's important. And that's what the future leader system does, is nurtures them. The four strategies, the first one is that we recruit them. Because both you and I just talked about how people don't want to be in a leadership role. They're uncomfortable, or they just don't want the exposure or be accountable, or just they don't want to feel like they're a failure. But yet when an employer intentionally goes out and recruits them, just like you would recruit somebody into a not-for-profit organization to support them, and then help them to see and understand and visualize that they can be in a leadership role. That's the first strategy. Part of that strategy is also to check their skills out, find out what skills they have and what skills they need. Because as I said, leadership is so broad, there's so many skills. So we focus more on skill clusters. An example of skill cluster is communication. There's probably about 10 to 12 to 15 different competencies within that. A future leader may be good at 5 of those. Well, that means that in the training, which is the second phase, is we would train those folks on what they need to do. Maybe they don't know how to negotiate. Maybe they're not really good at leading meetings, to help them round out their communication skills. So we recruit them, identify them, assess them. And in the assessment phase of the future leader skills, we look to see what the job will be like 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, not just today. And that's what many companies miss, is they just want to take a leader from the team, put them in charge of a team of 5, and assume that the skills won't change. But leadership is a long game. So what skills would they need 5 years from now, 4 years from now, that they don't have? And that's also part of the training. So the second strategy is training. And there's two keys to the training. It's not always classroom training. That's important. But what it is, it's learning how to fail successfully through games. Games can teach a person how to lead. And uh, it's so beneficial because the new generations that are coming into the workplace, who are being today's leaders or will be tomorrow's leaders, they have had a game in their hand via a phone or some device since they were 6 months old. So they understand games. And so using games to teach skills, I've done that in early my career since I started as a professional speaker in the 80s, is using games to teach. And I found that it worked with the professional mindset, with the skilled person, again, engineers, accountants, bankers. They understood games, and they understood the rules of the games very quickly. But also in the training is that they are required to be in leadership roles. If there can't be leadership roles in the company, then there's leadership roles outside. When I started my career, and this was one of very beneficial thing, I was part of my job was to be part of a 501(c)(3) organization, and to be part of that by being a leader. So that was leadership practice. But there's leader opportunities in communities, in neighborhoods, in church situations, in social organizations. I see young men and women together in a group, and there's clearly a leader who's leading them. Doesn't realize that they're a leader, but they're influencing everybody else what they're doing. And so they practice it. as part of that second phase, the first and the second phase of the strategies is that they get a mentor and a coach from day one. And both of those people provide the guide rails and the learning and the coaching and the dialogues and conversations they need to have to help them because we want the new leader to fail successfully because they will fail, but they fail successfully. So they have both a mentor and a coach who serve different roles and help the leader to know what they don't know. And the more that they practice it, whether it's inside the company or outside. And let me go back to inside the company. Every employer has hundreds of projects that are not getting done because they don't have people to run it or lead it. I would take a brand new leader and immediately put them in charge of a very simple project and observe them on how they do. In fact, this is what the United States Marines do, is that they get their leaders by identifying people who have potential. Step one, they then figure out the skills that they need. And then once they're in a leadership role, they're observed. And after everything that they do that is part of this new role is they get immediate feedback. What worked, what didn't work, what do you need to work on, things like that. So that's what the coach and the mentor help them do is to figure that out. Um, and then we finally go to, so we go from recruiting them to training them and then giving them those experiences so that they really know what it is that they are working on. And finally, the last one is mastery because leadership doesn't stop after 2 or 3 or 4 years. It's a continuation because what most people don't realize who don't understand leadership, it's a mindset. It is not simply a set of skills because once a person is in a leadership role and they feel good about it, they can't go back. They will always see everything. Even if they say, I'm not a leader, their mind will say, oh, they'll see it much differently. They'll see it as a leader does. And I guess that's what surprises me about myself is once I started being in a leadership role in college and high school and in Boy Scouts and other places, I saw things differently. And so that's where mastery comes in is that then what is the game plan for this person going forward? Where else do they want to go? What other skills that they need to do? They probably won't rely that much on a mentor or coach, but still those people are still available to be a brainstorm to help them, the person do that. And the biggest payoff of any kind of formalized leadership training is the fact that once you develop a good leader, they in turn will develop good leaders. So it builds on each other. So you find 3 people who are good leaders, and suddenly now you've got 6 new leaders soon, and then on and on. And so the organization has a perpetual deep bench of future leaders ready to go, ready to take over at any particular time. And that's why I work specifically with fast-growing organizations because they constantly, as they're growing, they need more people in team leader roles or supervisor roles or such as that. And so it builds, and pretty soon it becomes a continuum where the company there's no worries about future leaders. I've heard employers say, well, they're going to go to somebody else. It doesn't matter. You launch their leadership career, they will forever be grateful to you, and they'll use what they've learned from you to benefit somebody else. So in effect, we're making the pie bigger and helping to have more great leaders everywhere, which is we need desperately today.
I love this. There's a system in place. It's very methodical. It's step by step. It creates an It's almost like it's setting up an infrastructure there for
Yes.
leaders, like you would do for a product. And why have we minimized this? Well, when it's the most important thing that will get us to the other end, to the outcomes, to the productivity, to the team health, to the organizational health, why not invest in something this, you know, important?
We've seen that sometimes in business, it's too short-sighted. We want to know what we did this quarter, what we did this year, and not look down the future. And yet the best companies, the most successful companies in the world, always are looking down the road far, far than we know. And so they are figuring out, okay, what do we need to be doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Well, leadership needs to be part of that growth strategy is where are these leaders going to come from? How are we going to do it? What are they going to do? How do we help get them ready? How do we prepare new people In fact, if a company really wanted to do it right, they would identify from the interview whether or not this person has a potential leadership role, sort of put a star by their name, and immediately begin the leadership development work from there while they're teaching their job. Because
Yeah.
the skills on the job and the skills on leadership most of the time are very, very closely aligned. We just don't talk about the leadership part. We just talk about, okay, you do this, you do A, B, C, D, and you do this policy. Okay, what's the leadership aspect? And pretty soon what happens in the person's mind, especially with younger employees, they see it's one and the same.
That's wonderful. I'm going to ask a side question and then I'm going to come back to the future leader system because something I remembered when you were talking about this. You said intuitively you can tell from a distance that this person is a good leader. You shared that
Or
with me
could,
one day.
yeah, or
And
could be a good leader. Yeah.
yeah, could be. How do you know that? How do you sense it? I just want to know that magic.
There's two ways. First of all, observe them in interactions with their peers. That was a nice thing about the presenting that I did for most of my career. I had people in a room for 8 hours, and so I got to observe them. And by asking them constantly to have interactions. Of course, you can imagine accountants hated that. Oh, I'm supposed to just sit here and you're going to give me the information and I'll go home and get my clock hours and I don't have to apply it. Well, I asked them from the get-go to apply it and they were constantly applying it. So I observed them. And so what I've discovered is our leaders speak differently. They see themselves differently. They're usually helping guide things. There's this let me just go back to human nature. We are born with two desires to have impact and influence. Every person born has those two desires. Well, leadership at its core is having impact and having influence. So some people somehow figured out on their own, maybe they got encouragement from their parents or teachers, others in their lives, that you can make a difference. And so then I noticed that they're having impact, they're having influence, they're offering great ideas, they're helping somebody who's struggling. They take a leadership role, even though no one asked them to be a leadership role. That's what I was doing in Boy Scouts in high school and college, taking these leadership roles because I wanted to have impact and influence and didn't recognize it. And of course, the people that I worked for, when I said I want to be a leader, they didn't recognize too that I could and wanted to have that impact and influence. So it's very important. So I noticed that. And then, of course, when I give the people challenges, or sometimes talk with them, I can have a communication with a young person, let's say maybe in their 20s, and just over conversation of 15 or 20 minutes, I can tell they have that leadership potential in them. That's why I call myself jokingly the leadership whisperer because I can sense it. And I also was able to tell what I call the top 10. I mean, these are the people that just clearly somehow figured out how to be a leader. And I would ask them, what's your life like? And everything they talked about was they impacted this, they had influence of this, they impacted this, they had influence. So it's easy to tell, but you have to be attuned to it, particularly the impact and influence.
You're listening. You're a whisperer. You're listening to those things.
And hearing and watching. Yeah.
For someone who is listening very intently, our listeners, and they're curious about growing their own leadership or helping others grow, how do they explore your future leader system? Where do they begin?
Yeah, if for some reason your employer doesn't seem to have the wherewithal or the desire to do it, you can actually then do the same thing yourself. And that is to figure out, first of all, what sort of leader that you want to be. What type of impact, what type of influence do you want to have? And most people do want to have a big impact and influence. And that's why I'm excited about the new generation that's coming into the workplace because they do. Some reason they get it. We're hearing every day about people who are anyway 12 to 18, starting companies, starting movements, changing their communities, changing other people's lives. Those are the people that we want to to really guide. And so if that's someone like you, figure out what sort of leader do you want to be? What is your stance about leadership? Is it being kind? Is it saving the world from pollution? Is it getting rid of hunger in your community? That is where you can start. Second thing is look for a mentor and look for a coach or it could just be a single person who you know is a good leader, and have a conversations with them. Ask them to be your guide, your help to just talk to about leadership and what they know. Ask them questions about leadership. The third thing is read biographies of great leaders. No matter where, they don't always have to be in politics, which seems to be the beneficiaries of a lot of books, but they could be in whatever field that you like. Neil deGrasse Tyson is just one of the amazing leaders. And so if you're into space and astrophysics, look what he does. Look how he talks. Look at the influence he has just in sharing his knowledge, but he does it in a way that welcomes people in, that doesn't put people away. And then go to your employer and say, I want to take on I want to have some impact influence. I noticed over here that we're not getting this project on going, or I have this idea that I would like to explore a part of my time, but also part of company time, and do that. And pretty soon, your employer will notice that your leadership potential, and hopefully then we'll have a much more formal process for you to become a leader. But again, look in yourself. If you have that desire for better things, having positive impact and beneficial influence, you will make a good leader.
Yeah, it's almost like you're saying everyone can be a leader if they choose to.
Yes, they
It
can.
requires that intentionality and then attention.
Yes.
You write books which are so easy to read, Ron. They are
Thank you.
fables. And the latest leadership fable, it introduces us to Theo. Theo is a brilliant technical expert. He's suddenly thrust into managing 25 people. It just reminds me, for me, all this is coming back.
So you're the prototype for Theo. How did I know that?
His journey is emotional, raw, and incredibly relatable, right? Because we've seen that. What
Thank you.
made you
Appreciate that.
choose intelligence as a central thread to that transformation of Theo from what he was to what he became?
If we look at the difference between EQ, emotional intelligence, and IQ, uh, just our normal measure for intelligence, we can't change our IQ. We can enhance it a little bit, but we have it. EQ, though, is learned. So emotional intelligence, and at the core of emotional intelligence is empathy, being able to put ourselves in the shoes of the other people. And that's what I've noticed of these men and women who are like you were, technical experts, just wonderful in their field, whatever it is. They often don't have much high EQ and particularly empathy because they're focused on things and not on people. A leader must be focused 100% on people and pick up nuances like when somebody's having a bad day with the day, or maybe somebody is about ready to quit, or maybe somebody is about to embezzle. Nuances like that, that's important. And that is by looking and seeing ourselves through the eyes of others. For instance, my example with Rita, I was just so focused on, being the leader and having impact at that organization that I didn't even, have a sense of how she was feeling until 2 years later. We had a big dust up. It was that I was not having any empathy at all. So as I observed these 14,000 plus men and women, I could tell who had empathy and who didn't, just in terms of their interactions, the way that they carried themselves, the way that they talked about themselves or about other people. And that was one of the things I noticed about the top 10%. It was always focused about the other person. It was never focused on themselves. When I would tell them, you are a top leader, I mean, just top 10%. They go, what? I'm not. I'm just, but I enjoy, leading my company or leading my team or leading in my organization or my profession. Uh, so I think I answered your question. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
what
get
can I
going and
do? Yeah, what can I do
oh,
for others?
I know the
Yeah.
fables. So some of the books that really had a big impact on me as I was learning about leadership were the fables. For instance, there was a book called The Goal. There was The 1 Minute Manager. In fact, that was probably the first one
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
read.
I have read
Who
that.
Moved My Cheese? And there's been many, many, many more. And so I got the idea from my first book, the Reluctant Leader book, was to take a CEO who is at the top of her game, and yet she's about to be fired and she is clueless as to why. And guess what she lacks? Emotional intelligence,
Emotional
empathy.
intelligence, empathy. Yeah.
And that's what the board of directors said is you better figure this out. So she immediately got a coach, and the story is about the journey she went. But I'll then for the second one, the empathy factor, I decided to use a young person because I'm speaking now more to younger audiences. So he's the height of his career, making lots of money, great respect. He doesn't have any sense of empathy for anybody. And then he's thrown into this leadership role by guess what? A boss who has no empathy himself. So you can see it's a self-perpetuating problem that when you have work for people that don't have any empathy or high IQ and you don't have it yourself, guess what gets reinforced? Not that. So empathy is really important. And so
Yeah.
Theo goes through a process and it's a lot of struggles. There's lots of tears. We're talking about him. And he resisted, he wants to give up and,
Yeah,
all those
yeah.
things like that. But it's the thing in a fable, you can carry the emotion and leadership because it's an art and it's about people. Emotion plays a big part. In fact, that's another reason why many people say, I don't want to be a leader. They don't want to deal with the drama of people. And yet that's part and parcel of being a leader because you're getting stuff done through people.
Because
You're
we are
getting stuff
humans,
done through
yeah, and
people with
humans,
humans.
yeah, you're
But
working with
80%,
humans.
now I would tell brand new leaders, 80% of your problems from here on in are going to be people problems.
That
Oh,
is one of the reasons, Ron, why people who become leaders, when they're promoted from individual contributor to leadership, go back to working with artificial intelligence. They don't want to work with human intelligence because humans are just too
I know.
complicated.
Artificial intelligence is going to tell, will tell me what I want to hear and, do what I say. So it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
crazy. But
and you know how the AI will tell it, what a great idea. You are so smart. You are the best leader in the world. Oh my God, aren't you great? Oh, I love you. And so
maybe we need
this
to come
just
up with
keeps.
an honest, yeah, maybe we need to come up with an honesty AI. We'll study you for a while and then tell you, no, you're really a bad communicator. You don't know how to ask good questions. No, the questions you ask have nothing to do with leadership.
Yeah, so
Okay, we're
you
on to
got
something.
something
Yeah.
in between, maybe something in between. But that I think the work you and I are doing is so important. One of the reasons I left my corporate job and came to the other side and become a coach was that I recognized that that work was so much needed and there was such a huge gap. There were very few emotionally intelligent leaders. And one of the reasons I reached closer to being a VP. I didn't become a VP, but if I had stayed there for some time, I would have been, is because I wasn't a master's in computer science. I wasn't the most technical person on my team, never was. But I had this gift of emotional intelligence that helped me connect with people at a very human level. And some people will have the gift, but others can acquire it. It's a gift that can acquire and it can multiply. The more we practice it, more it multiplies.
Yes. And that's part of why in the future leader system it's very important that the future leader goes not only deeper in the organization, but also outside of it and interact with people who are unlike themselves, who don't understand what their profession's all about, and learn that and try different experiment, so to speak. And that's where the coach and mentor provide the guardrails. So let's say I decide to be a leader in a not-for-profit organization and I bomb and a project. Well, okay, pick myself up, learn from my coaches and mentors, and then go back and try it again. So that practice, that ongoing practice, that's the art of it.
Yeah, yeah. So as we come to the close, the time went really fast, isn't it?
Yeah, that was only 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Still,
What's one message you want echoing in for our listeners long after this episode ends?
we cannot let people to figure out how to lead on their own. And yet 98% of the people that I've coached over the years, that's exactly what happened. They were put in a leadership position and that's it. Sort of like crash test dummies. How crash test dummies are put in a car and then crashed and then they try to figure this out. Well, that's what a new leader is like from the get-go. And they feel that way. We cannot do that. We need to have a very focused, intentional approach to shaping the future for that leader by giving them the guidance and support and capitalizing on not only their talents and their life experiences, but also more importantly, their desire to have impact and influence. And those are the catalysts to help those individuals. And so we need that approach. And so that's why I came up with the Future Leader System because it's very formal. It has outcomes that are measurable. The biggest outcome is that you'll have more great leaders. Another one is that you'll have a competitive edge that none of your competitors have because you are uh, getting people ready to lead. And then, more importantly, the the person will grow faster because, as I said, it's 5 or more years to get a person from where they know nothing about leadership to where they start feeling comfortable. You shorten it that you shorten
Mm.
it significantly, and as they're growing to be a leader, they're also coaching and mentoring other people who are interested in leadership. So they have fresh, raw experiences of where they failed or they succeeded, and it'll become really enlightening for this new leader. So we need to capitalize on the young men and women who are coming to the workplace, who are just have great ideas. In fact, this is the thing that amazes me is when I started is we call them an entrepreneur and they start a business. These young men and women, they're creators and they will create an app and they'll create this maybe some kind of a program on TikTok where they're teaching what they know. Well, those are future leaders, and they've already told us that they want to be seen and they want to be heard and you want to have impact, but they need guidance from people like you and I who have been there before to encourage them and to help them capitalize on that. And by doing that, they will quickly then not only become leaders, but they'll understand there's certain things that they can and cannot do. Just as an example, recently there was a TV report where this young man was shooting a TikTok video in the middle of the street, and the police told him that he was blocking traffic, and he couldn't understand why it was not good because I'm shooting a video. That's more important than than traffic. And that's what I mean is that men and women. I sounds like I'm picking on Gen Z and Gen and Alpha, but I'm not. Just there are people from other generations as well. But those are the men and women that are have coming to us with fresh ideas, different things that we have never envisioned, and they'll make it happen. However, they need guidance. They need those guardrails. They need the support of a coach and a mentor who ensure that they get to where they want to. And I tell you, I see a very beneficial future for the whole world once those young men and women get into a leadership role with the proper guidance, such as like the Future Leader System.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Ron. It's a brilliant invitation for everyone who is listening and watching today. Please reach out to Ron, pick up one of his books, read it, and follow it because there's nothing to lose. In the end, you will be a better leader than you were before. So
Right?
that's my invitation.
You're going to help make the world a better place, believe it or not.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Ron, for being here, and it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Kanu. I appreciate the invitation, and it's been a pleasure talking with you as well.